Welcome to ENside Politics, our weekly podcast on how San Antonio politics really work. I'm Greg Jefferson, Metro Editor of the San Antonio Express News, and I'm joined today for our monthly roundtable by Laura Barberena, owner and operator of Viva Politics, and Eddie Aldrete of Aldrete Strategic Partners and the public affairs podcast Beyond the Bites. Welcome. We have a lot to talk about.
Yes, I'm excited. I spent all morning listening to Bad Bunny and J-Lo on the way up here. Because,
nice.
But, you know.
Let's start with early voting.
We're not going to go national. We're going to stick local.
No.
We'll stick local.
We're going to stay local, and we're going to talk about early voting, which looks like it's going nuts, Laura.
It feels like it's going nuts, but unfortunately, I have to bring the news that it's actually kind of like it's better than 20. What is it? 20. I have to look at my notes here, but it's not actually. It's not Obama numbers. Let's put it that way. These are not Obama numbers.
Didn't we have a record-setting first day of early voting 1 week ago?
Absolutely record-setting.
So what happened?
But what happens is when we look at numbers, we look at percentage of registered voters. Mm-hmm. So what's happening is while, yes, many more people are coming out to vote, what's happening is we have many more registered voters now, and we've had an increase of about 100,000 voters added to the roll since the last election. So what you're seeing is, yes, there is an increase in voters, but it's just part of the natural increase that we would experience because of population growth or because of strong voter registration outreach. But this really isn't acting much different than other elections, to be quite honest. We are seeing that compared to the COVID election in 2020, mail ballots are a little lower than what they were in 2020. And again, I would assume it was because of COVID, right? There was a bump in COVID mail ballots. But this is not acting any different than any of the other elections with respect to mail-in ballots. Yes, there's excitement. We feel it. We feel the excitement, and we want that excitement to go and continue because we want people who traditionally don't go out to vote. But yeah, this is pretty much acting like a typical San Antonio, Bexar County election.
Is where the turnout is happening, is that also pretty traditional? I mean, are we seeing voters come out in the same places in big numbers they normally do, or is it? Yeah,
one of the things that I noticed, and again, I haven't really delved down into the data like by precinct, but you kind of gauge by looking at the early voting sites, and we have seen some sites that normally don't have a lot of activity have activities. So like Northwest Vista College, for instance, there was a huge spike in turnout over there, which is kind of nice. But then when you look at the map, you also see it's one of the few early voting sites in the area. So it's definitely,
so it's not just a bunch of not a bunch of lefty students, but also maybe more conservative homeowners coming in.
Yeah, and that's also in that congressional district that's in play as well. So,
and these are, to your point, these are also driven by competitive races. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So in this particular case, you have the state rep district 118, and then
swoops around
121. Those two districts are highly competitive, and you're going to see high turnout there.
Yeah, most people think 118 is just over to the kind of the southeast, but it actually swoops around. It's this strange looking.
Yeah, it's like a horseshoe.
Yeah, like a horseshoe. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Now, what do you take? What do you take from the turnout so far in terms of a race like Colin Allred, the Democrat running against Ted Cruz? Is there anything to be gleaned from the numbers you've seen in early voting and how he might do?
Well, I think when I think about that race, I look more towards some of the polling. And what we're seeing is to me, it's kind of, I look at Emerson College polling because it's a organization that I have an association with. And they show a 1 point difference with Cruz ahead by 1 point. Yeah. That seems really close and we're all excited, but 1 point in the state of Texas is like, 180,000 votes. So this is still not like small potatoes here. Like it's a big number that he still has to overcome. But what's interesting in their poll is showing, and this is so talk about counterintuitive, is it showing that independent voters as we move into these final weeks are moving towards Trump. So we see him ticking up a little bit more and Harris sort of staying the same. But on the Cruz Allred race, they're actually breaking towards Allred, which is interesting to me because you would think that.
So you've got this weird divergence,
Trump Allred vote? Like that exists? It must exist. And I think Allred has to hope it exists in the numbers of 180,000 so that they can overcome this deficit.
What makes that race really interesting is the approach that Allred took from the beginning. Mm-hmm. He has distanced himself from Kamala Harris because he was going after a lot of independent voters and disaffected Republicans. Mm-hmm. And he's kept a low profile, very opposite of what Beto O'Rourke did back in 2018. As we've come in towards the tail end of the campaign, he was in Houston with Kamala Harris, and so now there's a little bit of an embrace there, and he seems to be getting a little bit of a public boost. Ted Cruz is running a totally different race than he ran against Beto. Mm-hmm. He's been, the last 2 years, you had 4 international bridges, 4 international presidential permits for international bridges that were stuck at the State Department. Ted Cruz helped negotiate to get those done, 1 in Eagle Pass, 2 in Laredo, and 1 in Brownsville. Mm-hmm. Now there's movement. All 4 permits have been issued. So Cruz is taking a much more hands-on approach to policy and legislation and doing things that can actually make a difference. So both campaigns, I think, are operating very strategically.
Right. It's interesting, though, because if that's what he's doing, he's certainly not putting that on TV, right? Like the ads we see on TV are like transgender boys are playing in girls' sports. Like that's like all over the television. Like that seems to be like he's double, tripling, quadrupling down on this notion that, you know, somehow boys are playing in girls' sports and that's just running rampant in our schools. But he's also he's been crying foul because he's assuming that he's making the claim that the Democratic Senatorial Campaign Committee has overspent on their support with Aldrete. And it gets complicated, campaign laws, but there's a limit to how much the DSCC can spend. And he's claiming they actually overspend because there's these hybrid commercials that they've done, and these hybrid commercials allow you to exceed these limitations. But the thing is that he's claiming that there actually aren't hybrid, right? That half the commercial has to be like to generic candidates, and he's making the claim that it's not. Right. Which is interesting that he's crying foul to me when he's doing a podcast that's raising literally millions of dollars for his PAC, Truth and Courage PAC, that's then turning around and, you know, so, I mean, again, he's kind of calling the kettle black, but again, a lot of, which I think is interesting because I didn't really see that happening in the Beto race where you kind of had that, you know, calling foul. And I think that's interesting. I think that's Cruz realizing it's going to be a tighter race than he probably would like it to be. Right now,
you'd mentioned Cruz he's focused much more on policy than he has in the past. And you could count as, you know, among those efforts, the hotly sought after SA to DC flight. He's been heavily involved in that. My question about that has been, and this is of course, the possibility of getting San Antonio getting a direct nonstop flight from San Antonio International to Reagan National, which we've not had in decades and decades and decades, and have wanted, because we have a strong military presence, strong cybersecurity presence, a lot of people who could benefit.
The largest cybersecurity presence outside of Washington, D.C.
Yeah, in Virginia.
Yeah, right. I'm actually headed to D.C. later this week. So
and how are you getting there?
I'm taking a direct flight. I'm taking the direct flight.
Right. Now, but my question about that is does that move San Antonio voters? I mean, he's really put a lot of effort into it, and he has courted a lot of attention. I mean, he's made sure that he's being seen helping secure this flight. Do San Antonio voters care about that? It just seems like a very kind of elite policy initiative.
It's an important policy initiative, but it's not one that traditionally triggers voters.
Right. Yeah.
Now, that may be one that you look at in the aggregate. Mm-hmm. If he got accomplished the presidential permits for the international bridges, which means more Texas-Mexico trade, and he got the nonstop flight, and he did X, Y, and Z, then people may look at that and say, he's being effective. I like him. I think I'm going to vote for him. But the flight by itself is usually not high on a list of what voters look at.
Right.
I just think people, they have this gut. There's just something about Cruz that you just like, ugh. Like, I think people have this gut reaction to him. And I think it's, compounded by, him flip-flopping on Trump, his, running to Cancun, his, leaving his little dog, Snowball, over there in the window. But, so it's just like, that's hard to overcome with policy, right? When people do like a gut check with you and you're like, you use policy to overcome that. That's, from a messaging standpoint, that's really hard. Right?
Does he give you a Nick feeling?
Yeah, look, I think when you look at, he's run for president. And a lot of people used to see him in that light. You talk to people in San Antonio, and when they go to D.C., you will ask them, hey, who'd you go see? Well, I saw these 3 congressmen and Senator Cornyn. You didn't always hear Senator Cruz's name mentioned because a lot of people felt like he wasn't focused on Texas. This time around, he is doing the types of things that he should be doing, which are now making people take a look at him, I think.
Yeah, but he also disrespects people too, which is why I think people don't want to go see him. Like, Kim Monterrubio, who was, she ran for mayor in Uvalde, she went and did meetings in Washington with him. And like literally, as she's talking to the fact that her child was slaughtered in her schoolroom, he's like, reaches over and is handed a Dr. Pepper by his staffer. And it's just like not being present in a moment when a mother is explaining, a mother and father, because her husband was with her, this very deep personal experience. And he's like drinking a Dr. Pepper, like, whatever, and when you have that kind of interaction with people, you just get it's that, really,
kind of ick.
It's an ick.
Okay.
I get an ick.
Now, but you'd mentioned.
I'm also a Democrat. Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh
What?
my God, yeah.
You heard it here.
So you mentioned the Hill-Emerson poll showing them basically 1 point apart. There's a more recent one, a New York Times Siena poll. I think it was October 23rd. They were in the field the 23rd from the 26th through the 26th. That shows Cruz at 50%, Allred at 46%. So 4-point difference.
All these polls are going to be within the margin of error. So,
right.
And I think one of the things, and it's a lesson to people when it comes to polls, when we talk about margin of error, it's plus or minus.
Right.
So it's like 40%. That could mean 43 or it could mean 37, right? So if you think about it, say it's matched up 40-40, right? It's a tie. Yeah. Well, it could also mean 43 to 37. It could also mean, you know what I mean? It could be 37-40. It could be, see what I'm saying? So there's a variation. So both polls are still within what I consider the margin of error. Right. So.
Now, locally, we have a UTSA Center for Public Opinion Research poll out last week showing exactly what you were describing, like a little more, Colin Allred's made some gains in Bexar County, in San Antonio. He moved from support of 44.3% in September to 47.8%. But also, as undecided has become decided, Cruz also picked up. So he's at 30.3% this month, up from 28% next month. First of all, what are you seeing both campaigns doing on the ground in San Antonio?
Well, I'll tell you what. One thing I don't see is
we'll do that.
What I don't see is the sign mania that Beto had. I don't see that for either of these candidates. So, but as far as all their get out the vote, all the block walking, it's obviously taking place. I have seen signs for both candidates. I just don't see them in the quantity that I saw them a few years ago.
Yeah, right. and again, we always talk about the authenticity of a candidate, right? So Beto being on social media and riding skateboards in Whataburger and doing all, here I am 24/7, live streaming what I'm doing, very authentic to who he was. but also sort of got this, and also he was texting me every day, like 3 times a day. I love mental texts every day. So I'm getting my Colin Allred texts, but I'm not getting them at the Beto rate that I used to get. And again, maybe they figure I'm good to go, so they don't need to reach out to me, right? So that could be it too. But I don't get that sense of sort of like viralness on Allred that you kind of had with Beto. And again, it could speak to who he is as an individual, right? That's not made me not authentically who he is as a candidate, so that might not bode well with him. But Beto, you saw all these TikTok videos, and it's kind of like sort of
not just to who they are, but I think to who they are trying to reach.
Exactly.
Because again, Allred was talking about his endorsement by the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, and Cruz had to come out and say, well, in this race, they've endorsed me. They had endorsed Allred as a House member. And he wanted those independent voters to know that if the U.S. Chamber of Commerce liked him as a House member, that they should be comfortable voting for him. So he is trying really hard and taking a totally different approach from Beto to reach those independent voters.
And there's also a physical difference, right? Beto's kind of this, thin guy. And look at Aldrete. He's like a big football player guy. He's a big guy.
Right? He is a beefy guy.
He's a beefy guy. He's kind of like the guy's guy. And you think, are the independents going for the guy's guy? Because Trump's kind of leaning into that, masculinity, hyper masculinity. So maybe the Trump Allred vote kind of makes sense because you're kind of going into that, I'm a football player. I don't know. That's an interesting thing to just go.
But I do think that both campaigns have been extremely strategic. Unlike what we saw in the Beto Cruz race, they both are doing what they need to be doing. I think from their get out the vote to the issues they're talking about, not necessarily the ads, but the issues that they're talking about at their various events. And to Lauda's point, it is going to be a very, very tight race.
Now, you're not hearing a lot of Trump greatest hits from Cruz, right? Why is
his KKK hits?
Why?
You mean his racist hits?
yeah, among others.
Well,
why?
It's because it's deplorable, Greg.
Well, because
nobody would say that crap out loud. Like Trump is saying the horrible things out loud. It's ridiculous, and nobody wants to.
So that implies that Trump is saying all this.
I know
all this out loud, and last I checked, he's still expected to win Texas handily.
Here's the reason.
Yeah,
we're Texas.
Right.
That's the reason. Texans are more independent natured. And while we have our partisan politics, again, I go back to both campaigns are looking at the same type of voter. And I think it's why Allred hasn't been attaching himself to Kamala Harris. And it's why Cruz has not been attaching himself to Trump. They want to be voted on for their own merits and their own issues and policy ideas.
Now, there was a couple of weeks ago, there was some media interest, we'll say, in the fact that Trump hasn't been campaigning. He has now. He appeared with Senator Cruz last week, but hadn't been campaigning with him in Texas. It sounds like what you're saying is that might not matter to Cruz so much. It might be more of a media-driven interest.
I think so. And again, in the closing days of this campaign, Cruz has appeared with Trump. Allred has appeared with Harris. So I think now it's like closing ranks, rally your core voter, and try to get everyone out to vote.
Okay. Yeah. So this is the last time we're going to meet before the election. So you get to call it. Who's going to win? Eddie?
When I was a young reporter covering the courthouse beat, I learned never to predict what the jury would do, and neither will I predict what will happen. I do think that
don't leave me hanging. Come on.
That regardless of who wins, we're going to have a 4-year hangover because of half the country being disappointed. But you're going to see. I think Also, every election, we have proven as a country that we can adapt. Right. We may not be comfortable adapting, but we can adapt.
I'm scared. I'm doom scrolling at 3:00 in the morning. I am anxious. I am nervous. I am one of those people who thinks that democracy is on the ballot. It's terrifying. I cannot believe we're here. Right. I'm scared to make a prediction because I'm still Hillary PTSD. I'll start there. And to me, this election is going to come down to Pennsylvania. Like, this is all about Pennsylvania. And I've also had to take a deep look at who we are as a country. And this Madison Square Garden rally that took place, and I kind of referenced Bad Bunny here as we started off. The things
who's now endorsing, Kamala Harris.
And
because it turns out you can't make jokes about
Puerto Rico
being a floating heap of garbage.
And
which is what one of the comedians, one of the introducers at Madison Square Garden,
this
at
is
Trump's
terrifying.
event there.
So I just finished reading a book called A Fever in the Heartland, an amazing book. Everyone should pick it up and read it because it talks about the KKK during the 1920s and how it took over the Midwest. And when you read that, you're like, oh my gosh, this is literally what's happening today, from using religion to co-opting vigilante groups to holding large gatherings without a hood. Like, literally, they did a huge march in D.C. It was scary times in this country. So if Donald Trump should win, I think we need to really sit down and realize this is who we are. Like, this is we want to believe that this is not who we are. But when you look at our history, this is who we are. And I'm really terrified about that. So I'm voting for Kamala. Kamala. I keep saying it wrong. Kamala. I'm voting for Kamala. And I'm hoping everyone out there will do the same, because I do feel like this is scary times. Right. And, I don't know how this happened. I don't know how you can have this rally take place and the rhetoric that's being used. It is hate of the other. They made the joke about the Puerto Rican, but they made some deplorable things said about Latinos in general, which I take 100% offense to. These are scary times, and I'm hoping and praying that Kamala wins. I'm gonna. God, I don't want to call it because I'm afraid I'm going to jinx it, but. We've got a really strong ground game going on in Pennsylvania. A lot of money is being spent, which could be a good thing, could be a bad thing, could be mean we're in trouble, we need to spend a lot of money there. But if Donald Trump were to win this election, we're going to have to just dust ourselves off.
And I think the one thing everyone can agree on is, regardless of who wins, we need to find a way to restore civility in public discourse.
Right. Is that possible if there's a President Trump?
It's going to be difficult, but it is. I think it is.
You possible. Would be doing that. I think it's not partisan to say you would be doing that despite the president. I believe that even if you're the person who wins is in your own political party, I think if you take the Bob Dole approach, former Senator Bob Dole, former Senator Ben Sasse, who don't mind standing up and criticizing members of their own party. We saw there's no better example than the late Senator Howard Baker from Tennessee during Watergate, who gave the infamous line, "What did the president know and when did he know it?" During the Watergate hearing. So it's incumbent upon everyone. Yeah.
But Greg, 4 years ago, I could have conversations with Trump supporters. I was okay. I was like, okay, you support Trump. I respect that. I respect that we really have, we have our differences, blah, 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 blah. Now I'm just like, how the hell can you be supporting this guy? He is off the rails, completely off the rails. Everything he's saying, the America that I know and grew up with, what he's saying should immediately disqualify him.
Right.
And Republicans that I respect, it's come on, guys, how in the world can you be supporting this individual?
Right.
I don't want to believe this is who we are. Right. And I'm having a hard time understanding that perspective.
I'll give you an example just real quick. Former Mexican Secretary of State, Luis Videgaray, I asked him in Mexico City once at an event how he handled the comments that Trump made about Mexico. And he said, well, it's like this dual track. What the public hears is up here, but we're focused on getting things done down here. And he said, we've met more often with the Trump administration, and we've made more progress than we did in 4 years than we did during the 8 years of Obama. So his point, not to say you need to ignore what is being said, but they were able to bifurcate that in order to achieve their goals.
Yeah, right. Just like Christians can ignore that he says grab them by the pee, just like Christians can ignore all these horrific things that he says about women, because they get what they want. But to me, what Trump is creating is he's creating a culture. He's literally teaching leaders this is what works. Yeah. He's creating a whole new generation of leadership that uses hate to motivate people as opposed to hope.
So here's how heavily the presidential race is weighing on us. I was actually asking you about the Colin Allred.
I knew you were, but I'm going to take it over here.
So it's a little prosaic, but how about let's focus on that one. You want to call that one? Eddie, let's start with
I think I think Cruz will probably eke it out. We're still, for the most part, on statewide elections, a red state. I think he has some built-in support, but he can't take that for granted, and I don't think he is. I think he's running scared, as you are supposed to be when you're the incumbent.
Yeah. Now, I'd like to just follow up quickly. Say he does kind of grind out a victory here, and President Trump wins. Does Ted Cruz does he maintain this interest in policy and actually doing things over his next 6 years, or does he kind of revert to this extreme partisanship, with kind of daily attacks on X and other social media platforms?
He's a different kind of person. He is very heavily focused on national policy and national issues. And I don't know that I can answer that question. I don't know him that well to be able to answer that question. But the other issue is that you have to figure out is if Trump were to win, does he take Governor Abbott? Does he take Agriculture Commissioner Sid Miller?
Please take them.
You're going to see a whole a different landscape depending upon, if Kamala wins, we may see Mayor Ron Nirenberg in Washington. We may see other people in Washington. So I think either, regardless of who wins, you're going to see Texans go to Washington.
Yeah. Laura, what do you think? Who's going?
I think where we're at this moment in time, I'm going to say at this moment, I think Cruz is going to sneak it out, but there is time. There is time to turn these numbers around. We have time. We have time.
Right.
And we still have to watch this to see, how these last few. The other thing I wanted to mention, because we didn't really talk about this, is the fact that there is, a libertarian on the ballot, right? So if this libertarian, whose name is Ted Brown, if he weren't on the ballot, I think Allred might have even a better chance, because, you're talking about probably in the area of 60 to 80,000 votes, maybe even 100,000 votes that could go potentially to Allred. Obviously, all of them wouldn't go, but that's the other little hinge here, right? That without that libertarian in the race, I think Ted, we would be probably in a better position. So,
and something else to keep in mind. Senator Cornyn is running for a majority leader. So should the Republicans win the Senate, you could see Senator Cornyn as majority leader. If Cruz wins re-election and the Republicans take the Senate, Senator Cruz will become chairman of the Senate Commerce Committee. So those are two very powerful positions. So regardless of who wins the White House, if the Republicans take the Senate. So that's this. Back to your polling example, the margin of error, regardless of who wins the White House, it depends on who wins the House, who wins the Senate. All these pieces of the puzzle will fall into place.
Yeah. Right. And again, I want to stress that part of why I don't like making predictions is because, we know through research that people want to vote their vote to matter, right? They're going to vote if they think their vote matters. And that, that's why you think, oh, Texas people know we're going to lose, therefore they don't vote, right? So it is important that people realize that their vote matters, that every single vote does matter. And, that's why I'm always like, because that's sort of my core where I come from. I'm from the school of Southwest Voter, where, we talk about increasing votership and making sure people vote and participate. So I always worry because these predictions and these horse races, I think can really make people feel, I'm just one vote. What does it matter, right? And I just want to stress how important it is. Yep. Although everybody listening to this is going to vote, so really, but maybe your cousin or your next door neighbor doesn't, so you can tell them to vote.
Okay, so we've spent a lot of time at the top of the ballot with the U.S. Senate presidential race. Each of you tell me which race has kind of captured your fascination below that. It can be state, local, whatever. Eddie, I'll start with you.
I think the 120 state rep 121.
Mark LaHood.
Mark LaHood. I think that Steve Allison, having endorsed the Democratic candidate there,
or Jordan Swift. Yeah.
Yes. That district is also the old Joe Strauss district. And I think you see a lot of people liked Joe as speaker because of his sense of independence and his sense of doing what was right. I think the same goes for Steve Allison. Steve Allison had a strong and loyal following. Governor chose to endorse Mark over the voucher issue. And so, and this, mind you, just a few years after the governor was running ads saying, I can't do what I do without the support of Steve Allison in the Texas House. So it's a different dynamic. I think you could see some of those disaffected Republicans, follow Steve. Some may stick it out. And then you wonder, is there any, Mark is the brother of the former DA Nico LaHood. Is there any advantages or disadvantages to the name? I have a brother, and sometimes I get praised because of him and blasted because of him. So
he's talking about James Aldrete, world famous political consultant. So
he's already texted me 3 times this morning.
By the way, is 121? I mean, so you do have Steve Allison endorsing Swift. Is it actually flippable? Is it winnable for a Democrat?
I think both 121 and 118, probably 118 may be closer to being able to flip, regardless of who the candidates are, than 121. But it just depends on how people in 121, are they going for the candidate? Are they going for what happened to Steve Allison? Are they going for public education or for vouchers? It depends on what their primary reason is for voting in that particular race.
Yeah, and I'm fascinated with the 118. I'm trying to
that's your
keep going. I'm running the numbers. It's this sort of young Latina dynamic. Raised lots of money, she's done everything that you could possibly do to win this race, short of being someone else. Her profile, right? And then just Lujan being who he is and his connection to community, him sort of walking back his statements about his daughter having abortion. Anyway, that is interesting.
Yeah, kind of muting things.
Yeah. But that to me is a very interesting race, and I kind of feel like if Carranza can't win it, then it's never going to get won. I just feel like she's just done everything you can do to possibly flip this seat, and if she can't do it, then we're just stuck with just gerrymandering, has won.
Okay.
Because I don't know how else you win that race. I mean, she's young, female, abortion's on the ballot. She's raised the money. She's got the ground game. What more can you do? Good Lord. Right.
What do you think about the race? Is John Lujan in trouble?
I think also this is an example of where historically we've had a lot of Republicans that can win in a special election, but then they lose in the general election. And so I think Juan is a strong candidate. I think he's done what he needs to do. He does have, strong ties to the community, former firefighter, entrepreneur, and I think he's doing what he needs to be doing.
And remember, the Democrat who held that seat before was Pacheco, who was not exactly, to the left. He's pro-gun,
Yeah.
So it's not,
Okay. Now, all the way at the bottom of the ballot, we've got way at the bottom.
Last but not least.
Yeah, and we'll have to talk about ballot fatigue as part of this. We've got 6 city charter amendments. Really, the ones getting the most attention are, of course, Prop C, which would remove the tenure and salary cap on the San Antonio city manager. This is the one that the business community has been most interested in for a long time. I mean, we first started hearing about this potential charter amendment more than a year ago. So the business community was beginning to get organized. Then, how's the campaign going? This is the Renew SA Political Action Committee. They are running the pro charter amendment campaign. How are they doing?
I think the biggest challenge that they have had is when you have 6 different items on the ballot, raising money from a business community where some businesses may not support 1 or 2 or 4 of the ballot items.
Right.
So how do you get, if this had been a campaign solely on Prop C, they would have raised a lot more money and they would have been spending that money. Yeah. I still think Prop C looks strong. I don't know. I've seen the UTSA poll on the salary caps and the salary raises and the moving from the 2-year terms to the 4-year terms. I think those are close to being on the bubble. Could go either way. But I do believe that Prop C is likely to pass.
Yeah.
One thing I'm seeing in Prop C is the firefighter. Let me just say, I love my firefighters. I love my firefighters. Okay, I love them. They're great. They come, and as Jones said when he was on your show, like when you see a fighter, they're there to help. In this case,
is Joe Jones, president of the fire union. They are
there to help, but they may be here to help themselves in this particular case.
Well, I mean, a little history back in 2018, when the fire union was basically at war with the city manager over a new contract. They got, I can't remember how many tens of thousands of signatures to get these restrictions on the city manager on the ballot. They got it, and kind of the business community's worst nightmare actually came true. Voters approved these caps by 59%, quite a bit. And now, when it comes time to undo it, the firefighters had a pretty good bargaining session with the city. They came to an agreement within 6 months, which is, almost record time for the city and fire union. And there was some thought that looks kind of crazy in retrospect. Like, why would you ever think that the fire union might actually come out in support of this proposition that would undo their work from 2018? Shocker. I mean, 2 weeks ago, the fire union says, no, we're not doing that.
Yeah.
Was it that simple, do you think?
Oh,
I mean, do you what do you think
were also, remember, I mean, they're a year from now, they're going back into a negotiating session because it's only a 3-year contract.
That's right.
Yeah. I mean, I guess, and the reason I bring up the firefighters is because I've been going to some of the early vote sites, and there are firefighters out there. They're wearing their yellow shirts, they're holding the signs, they're saying, vote no on C.
Yeah.
So, does that make a difference? The problem is with these elections where people have no clue what's on the ballot, and you're walking up and you're like, okay, I'm going to go vote for Harris. I'm going to use Harris as an example. I'm going to go for Kamala. And they're walking up and they're like, I know nothing about, I have no interaction with city government because I've never voted in city elections before. I only come out for presidential. So I'm not even on the voting list or the mailing list of the folks that are sending information about this. I walk up and there's the firefighters and they're like, vote no on C. What do you think you're going to do? So, I mean, the firefighters having a presence at the polls could really make a difference in this election. And we've seen them out there in full force.
Yeah. I mean, it's worth noting that the UTSA poll last week found that, 71.5% of their respondents didn't even know there were charter amendments on the ballot.
Right.
We're completely unfamiliar.
Right. And I think these particular findings from the second poll are probably more accurate because they actually use the actual ballot language.
To end the poll.
They weren't paraphrasing.
Yeah.
So so that I think gives kind of clues in. But I do think firefighters' presence at the polls could make a difference here. And these elections, presidential, drive people out who don't vote in primaries, who don't vote in city elections, don't vote in special elections, they don't vote in school board elections. They come out for presidential and they vote 1 or 2, 3 things and then sort of like, I don't know anything else, and then they stop, right? They call those undervotes because they don't vote in any other things. But if you got a firefighter out there saying, hey, we're here to help, no on C, like, oh, well, maybe that could.
So whereas they might have just skipped it, because a firefighter said vote against Prop C, they might actually go. Do you think that's true?
Yes, and I do. To Lauda's point, this is a presidential election, and it's not a municipal election except for the charter amendments that are on the ballot. So there's no council members that are running, so people aren't focused on municipal issues if you're not engaged or involved in some way or follow City Hall. Now, there are people that can make a difference. You can share. There's a lot of family members, friends, colleagues who call and say, "What are these propositions again? And what is the only two I know, or these two? What about all the others?" So this is, I think, an opportunity to share your thoughts and your understanding of the propositions with family, friends, and colleagues.
Right. Now, the ballot language on Prop C is interesting to me because it basically says city council shall have full authority over the city manager's tenure and salary. It doesn't say anything about removing caps. How important is that? Do you think that voters would kind of recoil at removing caps or curbs on the city manager? Is that why it's worded in that way?
You actually have. I've had several people tell me that two people that they voted for it because they thought term limits were good, not understanding this is not
You're taking them away.
Officials.
Right.
Yeah, that it's a hired city manager, which gives me a little pause for concern. But you have, yes, and I think that's usually the role of the Express News to give the context on the election.
I think we've done that.
And the ballot language didn't say, "Oh, by the way, this is undoing your vote from a few years ago."
2018.
What you did before was wrong, so you need to fix it.
You have a chance to make it right.
You have a chance to make it right. That's not what the ballot says, and it doesn't say that because obviously people don't want to think that they voted wrong. Right.
Now, Eddie, you've got a lot of friends in the business community. When these restrictions passed in 2018, was there a feeling that, oh no, these are like caps like this are just really hard to remove? How much concern did that cause the business community at the time?
A lot. It was a lot of heartburn, and I think that's why people started, talking about how do we fix this. We don't tell the Starbucks board of directors how long they can have their CEO, and I don't think that we should be telling the city council how long a city manager should stay. If it's a good city manager, then the council should keep them on. If it's a bad city manager or that city manager is creating issues, which is let's see, how long was Cheryl Scully here? 14 years?
13.
13, okay. And so, that's a lifetime in city manager life or years. And I think the council should have that flexibility. So I think that's why there's such strong support for Prop C from the business community.
Last question, and it is about city council pay and pay for the mayor and giving him a raise. Is this going to be a tough sell for voters, do you think?
I think it's hard. Two things. Number one, and I think I mentioned it the last time I was here, is The research shows that the average council member spends 60 to 70 hours a week on their job. And they have not received a pay raise since 2015 when they were given salaries to begin with to go beyond the $20 a week they were getting paid for their council meetings.
Right. Yeah.
We have experienced a lot of inflation over the last few years. And so when you go 10 years without a pay raise, is it justified? That's what a lot of people are trying to figure out. The amount is not huge. And there's a lot of people that have mixed feelings on this. Some want to see a pay raise, but others are concerned about will that attract professional politicians who are coming in for the money and not coming in for the altruistic reason of wanting to serve their community.
Yeah. Is that has San Antonio's electorate changed to the point where that's really not, fear of overpaying? You don't want to encourage the professional politicians by paying them kind of a livable wage. Are we kind of moving past that as a city?
Well, when you compare a council to the county commissioner's court,
Right.
where they make, 3 times or more what a city council person makes, I think, yes, we can probably get past that.
Yeah. Laura, what do you think?
This is a tough one because families are, hurting right now. And there are a lot of families, working families who live in poverty. And we always think of this work of as public service. And at the same time, you want to attract professionals to do this work because we want experts to come to the table and make these decisions for us, right? It's a tough sell for me because I think folks see the amount of money and I think they balk at the amount, right? And that the fact it's sort of indexed this time, right? So it's not like this is a set amount.
Right.
This is going to grow on its own. And I think
as the median income rises,
right. And I'm not saying it's not fair. I'm just saying that I could see many people feeling that, hey, this is public service. You should be able to get rich off of this. I understand it's not being rich, but but there is a sense of like, you get to go sit around and cut ribbons all day and go be in fiesta parades and we're paying you this much money. Like, I don't know that they really understand the true workings of what a council person does. And if you don't understand that, you're probably going to think that that's too much money because you're not seeing the day-to-day work that they do. And again, keep in mind, this is not the municipal voter. These are not people who are in tune with local city government politics. These are folks who are, not people that don't come out to vote on a regular basis, right?
And I think what you'll hear from council members is that they're on 24/7. When they go jogging, they'll get stopped. When they go to the grocery store, they'll get stopped. When they go to church, they'll get stopped. And so there's always the time for people to want to say, hey, while I see you here, I want to talk to you about this issue. I think the other conversation that came up during the Charter Review Commission was there are 3 attorneys currently on the council that make outside money to supplement the $45,000 that they do receive. And so one of the rationales for raising the rate was to try to prevent people from having needing a second job so that they could focus on doing what they need to do as a council member. So there's logic and rationale on both sides of that issue.
One of the things that concerns me, though, is that we're not really changing any of the structural systems behind this. So, for instance, to run for city council, I just need $100. So, hey, this is paying $70,000. Psh, I got $100. Why don't I just put my name on it? Imagine, Greg, this is not out of the realms of possibility. What if 100 people paid $100 to run for council?
Well, we've got 100 people running for mayor right now.
But you know what I'm saying? Like, that is a possibility. And and so now you're going to have a ballot that's 20, 40, 50 people long. Like, I think this is now you could have just folks to just say, what the hell, I'm just going to throw my name in there to see what happens.
Yeah.
Because the research shows that when there's a whole bunch of people, suddenly ballot placement matters. So you go, you're a nobody. I paid my $100. I pulled number one. I'm the first name. Woohoo! I could be your next council person. Like, I mean, I say it in jest, but it's really not out of the realm of possibility. Lots of people could then start.
So what
and that's not necessarily a bad thing.
So you're saying we need to go back to $20 a meeting?
No, I'm not saying we go back to $20 a meeting.
Okay.
What I'm saying is that what we need to do is think about how we can ensure that people who are only serious about running run, right? And I'm not saying make it out like just say we raised it to $1,000 to file, right? But then say, all right, or $200 plus X amount of signatures, right? So that you're not disenfranchising people who can't afford $1,000 to run, but they really have to work for it, right? Like they really have to want.
They have to show a base of support.
That they have a base of support and that they're serious about it. Not that, hey, I just want to see my name on the ballot. Is it $100? I mean, come on, like that's really to me that you're inviting all kinds of issues, and elections are expensive. Hello, they're real expensive to do, right? And pretty much now, almost everything goes into a runoff, right? You know,
how much is a council campaign? A good one?
I was talking about from the Bexar County Elections Department standpoint of actually putting on an election, right? So you put on an election, then you're having to do the runoff.
Okay.
So that's what I'm talking about, the cost it takes to actually run an election, right?
But to your point, you have a cap of $500 you can contribute to a council member. So, a city council race can be anywhere from $30,000 to $150,000.
$200,000.
said the political consultant.
Yeah, but also, one thing about that, and we talk about the change from the 2 years to the 4 years. So the way right now the campaign finance is structured is it's to election cycle, right? So it's tied to an election date. A lot of people think that our contributions are tied to the state. It's not. We have local ordinances on that. Right. So if we were to extend it to 4 years, essentially the money that you raise in 2 would now be 4. And there's only a set amount of pool of people.
So once you give $500 to a council member, you have to wait 4 years.
4 years.
Okay, so you've broached that thing. So the other proposed city charter amendment that you were referring to would give city council members 4-year terms. So 2 4-year terms as opposed to 4 2-year terms.
Right.
My one question to you, and then we have to end it.
Have to stop.
How, say voters adopt that and you now have 4-year terms for city council members, how does that change the dynamic between city council members and the city manager?
Well, I think a couple of things. Number one, city managers are known for, especially when we had 2 2-year terms, they would just ride you out and wait for you to leave office to go do what they want to do.
That's what underlies my question, right? Because you have city council members who, particularly in their first term, they've got to show progress. They have to have deliverables, projects that they can show voters the next time they run. And for that, they need the city manager. They need their help, whoever the city manager is. So they're kind of in debt to the city manager to a degree. And that changes, I think, with 4-year terms, right? I mean, so you've got a different kind of relationship. Am I overstating it?
Maybe. You're still going to need the city manager to get stuff done.
Right.
You still are.
Yeah.
You're still going to need them to, help fund projects, make sure that the money's there, because there's always magic money that magically appears. And you're like, where did that money come from? The city manager found it. It's not good politics to piss off the city manager because they have magic money. So to your point, I mean, they can still control the money. I mean, they want to hold out 2 years, hold out 4 years. I mean, the point of it is that we have a strong city manager government. That is the kind of government we have. And, maybe it might change it a little, but I don't see it as changing significantly. I mean. Yeah,
I think I'm not a big fan of the 4-year terms. We just had an example in District 1. Succour beat Mario Bravo after 1 2-year term because the voters in that district felt
they'd had enough. They'd seen enough.
There were several issues that he was going through, and they saw her as a viable alternative. And she is extremely responsive to her constituents and is very active and out and about in the community. She's been focused on this Broadway St. Mary's street closure issue, and now she's focused on other issues. But the point being that I think that's a good example of why a 2-year term limit is a good thing, because I think having a 4-year term and a recall mechanism is different than having a 2-year term.
Yeah, and then going back to this whole notion that we're not changing campaign finance around this, essentially what you're creating is you're only allowing elitists to run, because it's actually doing the opposite, right? So only people who have money, who can self-fund, will end up running and then be paid more. Yeah, so it's just like you're really not creating an opportunity for those who are, don't hold the levels of power to step into those positions, because they won't be able to raise the money with the current structure.
Okay. Now I really have to end it. Okay.
3 more things.
Okay.
3 more things.
One thing. Have you voted? Have you voted early?
I'm actually voting this afternoon.
Okay, great. Where are you voting?
On Inner Park at the Bexar County Constable's office.
I have not voted, and it's for a reason.
Really?
Well, I'm going to. I like to get the mail. I like to keep getting the mail. But I probably will do it this week, just because I do think Election Day there'll be long lines. And I usually am an Election Day voter just because of that, because I want to keep getting the texts, and I'm kind of a geek that way, that I want to get that. But I think I'm...
You see, my wife and I voted yesterday. Yeah, so Sunday afternoon to stop getting that stuff.
No more texts from Colin Allred.
Right.
I still want Colin Allred texts. I gotta go to bed at night knowing that I got at least 2 texts from him.
Okay,
but I'll be voting at Woodland Point.
Okay. You have to vote early, because you never know what's going to happen on Election Day.
Absolutely.
It's okay.
And
I'm going to vote early. It's okay.
Those watching and listening to us, get out and vote. You have to Friday, right? Is
Friday's the
last day for early voting.
Right.
Yeah.
So
and I would go before Friday, because ironically, this week the early voting numbers, Friday was actually out. There were more people voted on Friday than on Saturday, believe it or not.
Yeah.
Friday, November 1st is the last.
Yeah. Friday.
Laura and Eddie, thank you very much. I appreciate it. We will see you back here next week. Thank you for joining us this week. And if you have not subscribed to the ENside Politics newsletter, shame on you, but there's a way to get over that.
There's still time.
Drop to the show notes in our YouTube channel. You can find a link there and subscribe. Thank you very much, and we will see you next week.